We could see the spire of the church reaching into the sky as soon as we turned the corner. It gave me a murky tingle of foreboding in the pit of my stomach. St. Michael's Church was a large, vaguely menacing structure that covered most of a city block. It featured a tower with a clock, a steeple, and a belfry. The steeple was capped with a roof lantern, which in turn had been outfitted with a lightning rod in the shape of a crucifix. It looked like a weapon of war, thrusting with murderous intent into the underbelly of the clouds. The longer I looked at the old church, the more off-kilter details seemed to jump out at me. None of it was particularly jarring on its own, but it all added up to create an unsettling atmosphere. Among other things, I spotted a toddler-sized pair of short pants lying in a clump of weeds, and someone had balanced the skull of a large dog on top of a tombstone. One of the empty eye sockets had been filled with a chunk of quartz, giving it a bizarre twinkle in the muted sunlight. "This is a bizarre place," Falling Sky said quietly. He wrinkled his muzzle back from his teeth and added, "I'm not very fond of the man in the black robes. He never did my people any favors, that's for sure." I gave him a sympathetic nod and murmured, "My dad always used to say that having a religion is like having a penis. Keep it to yourself. Don't shove it down anyone else's throat." I think that about sums it up. Falling Sky chuckled. "Your father's a wise man. Well, we're here. Let's go have a look around." We entered the church grounds and made our way to the main entrance, the skinwalker sniffing at the cobblestone path behind me as we approached the front steps. He lifted his head and grumbled, "No one has a scent. Remember, this is real. Nothing is alive in this place, but they aren't spirits either. They're more like projections on a screen." I replied, "It's probably good that nothing has a scent, because people didn't wear deodorant back then. Pretty sure they didn't have to bathe that often either. Probably still smelled better than you, though." "What do you mean?" he demanded in an offended tone. "Are you saying I smell bad?" "Well, you are a bear, aren't you? Do the math." "You're just jealous," he huffed indignantly. "I could be anything I want. You can only be yourself. You must be so boring. I pity you." I grudgingly answered, "I'll give you that one, man. Pretty much stuck with being myself. Thanks for reminding me." The interior of the church was draped in shadows. We slunk along the main aisle towards the altar, moving with furtive footsteps in the silent gloom. As we drew closer, I saw a woman in a headscarf polishing the prayer desk with a rag. I whispered to Falling Sky, "Should I talk to her?" "I don't see anyone else you can talk to," he whispered back. "And why are we being quiet? None of this is real. You could piss all over the floor. She wouldn't even notice." I hissed, "Don't pee on anything, for fuck's sake. Here, just hang back for a minute and behave yourself." Falling Sky snorted, "Here's some behaving for you," and squeezed out a horrible fart. I gave him a disgusted look and lifted my shirt over my nose. I choked. "Did something crawl up your ass and die? I thought there weren't any smells in this world. Fucking hell, man." He giggled at me and said, "Yes, but we aren't part of the world, and you shouldn't scold me for my bodily functions. I'm 800 years old, Billy Whitebread. Have some sympathy for an old man." The woman straightened up as I approached, and she exclaimed, "We don't get many visitors here on a Saturday afternoon. My name's Constance. The Reverend isn't here, I'm afraid, but perhaps I can be of service to you?" I sighed. "Well, Constance, I sure hope so. Did you have a funeral for a member of your congregation this morning? A little girl named Catherine." She folded her hands together and murmured, "Yeah, it was a tragic affair. Only 7 years old, and she was murdered in her own parlor. They say it was her own father who did it, but I don't believe that to be true." "It wasn't him," I agreed. "I don't suppose you have any idea who did it, do you? Because, I mean, that would be, pretty fucking awesome." "Oh, I had my suspicions," Constance said quietly, "but I can't prove them. I just had a feeling, that was all. And you can't very well go to the authorities because you have a vague feeling of someone's guilt, can you? So I kept it to myself. It wasn't long before I was murdered, too. I did a double take and said, What? What? Who killed you? I don't know, Constance said quietly. I would suspect it was the same person who killed poor Catherine. I kept my suspicions to myself, but it was probably written all over my face whenever I saw them. I was out for an evening stroll beside the river when they chose to strike. The fiend must have been lurking in the shadows as they followed me to my doom. When the footpath passed beneath the bridge, the horrible beast rushed up behind me and pushed me into the river. I clutched at his sleeve as I fell in, but it tore beneath my grasp, and I came away with only a bit of cloth in my hands. It was very dark beneath the bridge. I never saw who attacked me. The current carried me away into the night, and, well, no one ever knew what became of me. I gawked at her with my mouth hanging open. She stared back with no expression. My mind was racing. Slowly, I asked, You wouldn't have any idea where your body ended up, would you? Constance nodded, and my heart leapt into my throat. She said, It was where the river bends as it passes Orville Haskins' farmstead. I was still alive when the water spat me up on the riverbank. I didn't drown, as my murderer had intended. I was too battered and exhausted to climb up the bank, and so I died of exposure. I winced and said, Oof, that's a cheerful little fact, isn't it? Man, that's rough. For what it's worth, I'm sorry that happened to you. Gently, she said, I was sorry too. Is there anything else I can help you with? I let out a deep, shaky breath. I asked, Can you maybe give me the name of the person you think committed the murder? Well, the murderers, I guess. Hers, yours, God knows who else. She shook her head, and in a grave tone she said, The heavens may know their identity, but I do not. If I can't say it's the truth, then it can't pass my lips. I grumbled. Fair enough, I suppose. Okay, thank you for your help. Constance looked at me in the eye and said, Friends always hide in the darkness. Expose the beast to the light, then bring judgment upon him. We all wish you the best. With that said, Constance abruptly disengaged from the conversation and went back to polishing the prayer desk. I stood there and watched her for a few moments, then I called out, Come on, big guy. Let's see if we can flag down one of those taxi carriage things. I think we're taking a trip out to the countryside. Falling Sky could barely fit on the bench seat of the handsome cab. He gave me a sour look and said, This is undignified. I smiled and made a sweeping gesture at his big, round, bare body. You could always turn yourself into something smaller, right? I mean, honestly, I'm not sure how far this horse can pull a fully grown bear. He rumbled. It could haul an infinite number of fully grown bears. This is a vision quest, Billy Whitebread. There's no here or there in this place. We are nowhere. He clambered up into the cab, and in a decidedly snarky tone, he added, It is my sacred right to live and breathe as whatever animal I choose. I thought we already talked about this. Respect my culture. He muttered, Whatever you say, weirdo. And I went to the back of the carriage to speak with the driver. The driver smiled down at me from his lofty perch at the back of the carriage, showing off about 14 yellow teeth. He exclaimed, Good afternoon, lad. Needing a lift, are you? I said, Yes, sir, I sure do. Can you take us out to Orville Haskins' farm? Do you know where that is? I do indeed, he replied cheerfully. Just a short trot beyond the town limits. Have a seat beside your friend, young man. We'll be off presently. I shook my head and replied, This fat ass taking up the whole seat. Can I sit up there beside you? I heard Falling Sky mutter in the background. Pretty mouthy for someone I could eat alive. Wouldn't be the first time. The driver shrugged and said, Whatever pleases you, sir. Watch your step on the way up. We jounced and bumped our way to our destination, and I watched our surroundings slowly roll past with wide-eyed wonder. He was a world just like my own, but it was also completely different. In the heart of the city in 1996, we had chain restaurants and shopping centers, pizza parlors, video stores. But in the 1880s, there were mercantile shops and general stores, blacksmiths, cobblers. Back in my present-day reality, blacksmiths and cobblers hardly even existed anymore. It was like watching a big-budget historical film with all the glamour scrubbed away, revealing the fresh piles of horse shit all over the road. I looked over at the burly apparition steering the carriage beside me and I asked, "I don't suppose you've ever heard of someone called the Bookman, have you? Or something? I'm just assuming it's a person, not a place." The driver darted an amused glance over at me and said, No, sir, not me. I don't know too much about books, I'm afraid. I must confess, I can barely read or write. I didn't get much school when I was a lad. Had to work, help support the family." I gave him a sympathetic look and said, "It sucks, man. Every kid deserves an education. Do you ever wish you can go back and learn?" The driver's lips curled into a sad smile. He replied, "Yes, sir, I do. When common people like myself can't read too good, well, that's a problem. You make sure the bookmen of this world aren't lying to you about what's in them books. If you ask me, a lot of folks put too much faith in them sneaky sons of bitches, pardon my French. That's how I feel in my heart." I turned his words over in my mind, and for a brief second I almost had a spark of an idea, but then it was gone, replaced with the clip-clopping of horse hooves and the monotonous squeaking of the axle. I asked, "How much longer?" And the driver abruptly halted his horse. The teeming city streets were suddenly gone, replaced by a dirt road and a ramshackle farmhouse. There was a barn drunkenly leaning against the horizon in the background. The property line was bordered by an ancient fence. It was slowly collapsing and rotting into mulch where it stood. In the distance, a handful of scrawny cattle were attempting to graze in a field of weeds and thistle. The driver boomed, "Here it is! Farmstead of Mr. Orville Haskins. Truth be told, I have no idea why anyone would go out their way to visit that old man. He's got bats in the belfry, old Orville does. He's a lunatic." I started to explain the situation, but the blank look on his face reminded me he wasn't a real person who I'd actually give a shit. I stepped down and muttered to myself, "Lunatic. Well, it should be interesting." Falling Sky struggled out of the carriage and lumbered over to stand beside me. He cracked his jaws in a huge yawn, let out a sneeze, and then he gave his head a vigorous shake. His skinwalker saw me staring at him. He demanded, "What are you looking at? Feels good, okay? You wouldn't understand unless you had fur." I looked up at the driver and said, "Hey man, I don't really have any money on me right now, and even if I did, it'd be from the wrong time period. Is it okay if no charge for you two fine gentlemen?" The driver interrupted. He gave me a meaningful look and added, "Be mindful of what he says to you. A lot of it'll be nonsense, but not all of it. You have to pay attention. He speaks in riddles." Falling Sky rolled his eyes and snorted, "All you people speak in riddles. I wish the universe could just pass us a note or something. It's taking too long." "If only it could be that easy," the driver agreed. "Good luck, gentlemen. I truly hope for the best." He pulled his carriage around in a tight U-turn, and he headed off back towards town. They got maybe 100 feet away before the driver, his cab, and his horse all disappeared into a shimmer of light. And then it was just me and the bear, standing in the middle of nowhere as a cloud of dust settled back to the parched earth beneath our feet. I looked over at the creepy little farmhouse and I murmured, "This place reminds me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. How about you lead the way this time, bear guy? I mean, you're all big and bear-like, so, you know." Falling Sky grunted. "I saw that movie too. It scared the crap out of me. You go ahead." With great reluctance, I started up the heavily rutted laneway, and the skinwalker trailed behind me. I already knew this part of our journey was going to degenerate into an ordeal. I could just about taste it in the air. Catherine's killer knew we were sniffing at his trail. Unlike the rest of the characters in this interactive murder mystery, the bookman was a real spirit, not just a projection of the past. He wouldn't stand idle as we sought to uncover his identity. One way or another, he would try to silence us. The driver wasn't exaggerating. Orville Haskins was very intense, to say the least. He came shambling out onto his sagging porch to greet us. Orville could have been anywhere between 30 and 70 years old. He was a hollow-eyed corpse of a man with a wild, feral stare. He was barefoot and shirtless beneath the grimiest pair of denim pants I'd ever seen. His scrawny torso was dingy with dirt, and his feet were crusted up to the ankle with months of accumulated filth. I was glad you couldn't smell the inhabitants of this world, because Orville definitely stank like a corpse. Orville peeled back his cracked lips and gave me an off-kilter grin, revealing a set of chompers that made the cab driver's teeth look like a set of Da Vinci veneers. He lifted his ragged hat in a cordial greeting, and I noticed his hands were just as filthy as his bare feet. I thought to myself, this guy ate with those hands. Ugh. Orville plopped his hat back over his greasy helmet of hair, and he squawked, "Good afternoon, sir. It's a fine day for absolution. Yes, sir, I reckon you fellers here to see a gal out by the river. She was murdered by the Shadow Man, poor thing. I was told about it in a dream. I go to see the angels, and they tell me things." Falling Sky slinked a little closer, his eyes bright with curiosity. He whispered, "I've heard of such things from the spirits. There are those who can travel to the spirit world while they sleep. They're called dreamers. Some of them are oracles, some of them are madmen." Orville nodded his head vigorously in agreement. A thin line of drool slipped from a gap between two of his baked bean teeth, and it ran into his whiskers. He said, "The Shadow Man's a bad feller. He has two faces. I went into town and told them all about the Shadow Man. They didn't believe me. Well, the angels said they wouldn't believe me, but I tried anyhow." I cast a quick glance over at Falling Sky, and was startled to see he was no longer a bear. He was now a lean and limber mountain lion. He saw my puzzled expression and whispered, "Just in case we have to run away. I know none of this is real, but this guy scares me." I waved my hand to secure Orville's wandering attention, and I asked, "Can you show us where to find her?" A glassy, haunted expression crept across Orville's dirt-smeared features. A fresh string of drool rolled over his scabby lower lip, and it oozed into his whiskers. "Well, she's nothing but bones now, nothing but bones and rags. Even bones can tell a story, yes, sir. Come on along, fella. I'll show you where she lay." We followed Orville across his barnyard, keeping a discreet distance as he rambled a steady flow of nonsense under his breath. The lawn was a thigh-high meadow of weeds and wildflowers, and the barn itself looked like it was ready to collapse at any given moment. Likewise, none of his fields had been tiled or planted in a very long time. The entire farm was gradually returning to the wilderness from which it came. He led us on a winding journey that ended up at the back of his property. It was bordered by a river, a winding and sluggish body of water that was more of a glorified creek at this time of year. We stood back and watched Orville stomp through the undergrowth, at the edge of the embankment, and still muttering a stream of gibberish under his breath, he stopped and said, "Yes, sir, this is the place right here." We climbed back down the crumbling embankment, and there was a heap of bones and a faded rag of a dress. I knelt down and examined the remains, wincing at its mangled condition. She'd been cruelly battered and broken by the ferocious current. Her skull was cracked, her ribs were shattered, her limbs were twisted and splintered. "It would have been better if she had drowned," Falling Sky murmured in a somber tone. "Terrible death. But now she's safe with her ancestors." "What's that stuff here in her hand? Looks like a patch of cloth. It's a different color than the dress." I carefully pulled the rotting material away from her broken fingers. It was indeed a thin strip of black cloth. I showed it to Falling Sky. This came from the bookman. I bet she ripped it off his shirt or something as she fell into the water. Falling Sky examined it closely, his tail lashing around in agitation. He said, "It seems too thick to come from a shirt. Maybe he was wearing a coat, a dark cloak." I nodded thoughtfully and tucked the scrap of cloth into my pocket. I mumbled, yeah, I think you're onto something there. A cloak, a long coat, something like that. Some of these guys ran around in extra long suit jackets, especially at night. It was a style of evening wear. I think that's why Orville calls him the Shadow Man. The skinwalker settled down on his haunches. His eyes narrowed in thought. He mused, "A man in a long, dark coat. Dead girl called him the Bookman. What do you think of when you put these two things together?" I muttered, Victorian-era library? Maybe? An accountant. Help me out here, man. What do you think? I hunkered down to get a closer look at the skeletal remains, but I had no idea what I was looking for. I mean, I wasn't a forensic specialist of any kind, was I? I was just a young fellow who'd bitten off more than he could chew. I looked up and called out, Hey, Orville, can I ask you a question?" Seconds went by without a response. I looked up just in time to catch a brief impression of a shadowy figure at the edge of the embankment. There was a swirl of black, and then the figure was gone. I gasped. Did you see that?" The Falling Sky was already scrambling up the slope. He paused at the top of the embankment, his tail lashing around, and he said, "You better come see this." I struggled my way to the top, and I inhaled sharply at what was waiting for me in the overgrown weeds. Orville had been quietly murdered as we were playing detective down below. His throat had been slashed open from ear to ear. I hissed, "What the fuck? This isn't how he died like in the real world. I thought none of this was real, man. That looks pretty real to me." Falling Sky frowned at the body. His eyes were troubled. "Everyone and everything we see here, it's all just a projection. Shouldn't be possible to harm them in any way. It'd be like stepping into a movie and interfering with the actors. It simply shouldn't be possible." I rubbed my eyes and groaned. Well, what happened anyway? I think we both know who did it, but how? Falling Sky mused to himself. "You and I should be trapped in the world of the living, but we found a way to step over that barrier. Likewise, the Bookman must have found a way around the veil that lies between the spirits and the great beyond. If this is true, the natural laws of what can and what can never be, they no longer apply to him." I nervously cleared my throat and croaked, "That sounds bad. I mean, if he can, straight up murder these astral projections, or whatever the fuck you call them, could he kill us too?" Falling Sky gave me a grim look. He said, "I don't know, and I don't wish to find out." I made an unhappy noise and cast a quick glance over both shoulders. I murmured, I'd love to expose the dickhead's identity and help Catherine. I don't want to die trying. I hate to say it, but I think we should maybe give up and go home. I'm not too keen on joining Catherine as a restless spirit." The skinwalker stretched up his hind legs and dropped a heavy paw on my shoulder. He said, "If he can break the boundaries between the spirit world and the greater beyond, he can also transcend the barrier between the dead and the living. It will not be safe from him there." I absorbed this information with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I groaned. "Oh, fuck me. Well, that sucks, doesn't it? I mean, look what he did to this fucking guy." Okay. I'll just, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what to do. Falling Sky dropped onto all four legs and started pushing his way through the weeds. He called back, There's only one course of action as of right now. I am officially relieving you of your leadership. Follow me. I hurried after him and gasped, "Hey, wait up! Where are we going?" Falling Sky looked back at me with wide, feral eyes. He licked his chops and growled, "We must go finish what we started. Prepare yourself, Billy Whitebread. We're going to war." We found another carriage waiting for us in front of Orville's ramshackle house. This one was a fully enclosed coach model with an elevated seat for the driver. The seat in question was occupied by a smartly dressed chap in a black top hat. A curtain was drawn back from a window as we approached, and a slender hand in a velvet glove waved us over. The door popped open. The skinwalker and I shared a questioning look. He said, "After you, Billy." I snorted. "Hey, wasn't I just relieved of my leadership a few minutes ago? Why am I climbing in first?" Falling Sky hopped up on two legs and gave me a push towards the carriage. He chuckled, "Because I'm the leader. The follower does what the leader says." I poked my head through the open window and gasped in surprise. The owner of the veiled glove was the actress Sharon Stone. She was wearing a Victorian-era dress, but her hair was cropped short and swept back, the same hairstyle she had in the movie Basic Instinct. She smiled at me and said, "Hello, duckling. It's been a while, hasn't it? You look good. Looks like you're putting some meat on those bones. How about a quickie for old time's sake?" I looked back at Falling Sky and groaned. "It's a succubus. Should we get in?" He waved at the endless stretch of dirt roads with his paw, and he sighed. "It's better than walking, I suppose." I sat on the bench on the opposite side of the succubus, and Falling Sky sat on the floor. As the carriage started jouncing back to town, the succubus gave me a sly grin and purred, "I hope you're pleased with the form I chose today. I thought you'd probably like it. After all, I know what you did when you rented that movie from the video store. As I recall, you did it at least 6 times, you wicked little beast." I looked down at the floor and muttered, "Yeah, thanks for the ride back and everything, but why are you here?" She gave me a shrug and said, "I think your little mission here is very honorable. It's very brave for a little snack like yourself to take on a nasty piece of work like him. Even the likes of a skinwalker is afraid of him. That's saying something." I gave her a sharp look and leaned forward. My hands knotted together in my lap. "You know who's responsible? Like his real name?" The succubus giggled. "Of course." She looked out the window. I waited for her to say more, but she just kept staring out the window with a vague smile. I snapped, "Well, you could save us a whole lot of time if you said it out loud. We could go back to the world of the living right now. Bingo bango, at once and done." She gave me a smarmy grin and said, "Oh, I'm afraid I'm not allowed to do that. The greater beyond works in mysterious ways. You have to figure it out on your own. I'm just here to give you a ride, but... oh, I don't know. Maybe I could give you a hint." I gripped her hand in both of mine and hissed, "Yes, please, anything at all." The succubus murmured, "Well, I'm going to need a little something in return. Quid pro quo, my sweetness. Lay with me again. You could have me in my current form. Would you like that? You could act out all those fantasies you had while you watched the movie." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat and shot a glance over at the skinwalker, who was looking on with an amused glint in his eye. He said, "Don't look over here, Billy Whitebread. She prefers beings that still have their souls intact. I traded mine to become a witch." I gave him a sour grimace and croaked, "How convenient. Fuck. Okay, weird timing, but okay. But we don't do it in front of the mountain lion. That's just weird. You can't drink any of my blood either. That fucking hurt. No way. And my soul is definitely off limits." The succubus pouted. "Not even a mouthful of blood? You're being stingy. Honestly, this is barely even worth my time, but I suppose I'll accept your terms." She put her head out the window and bellowed, "Driver, stop the carriage." There was no answer to the demon's command. A look of alarm spread across her face. She leaned closer and urgently whispered, "I hold thrall over all entities who exist in the greater beyond, real or otherwise. This isn't right." A whip cracked across the horse's right flank, and the stallion veered off the road. The carriage jounced across a shallow ditch and started careening through an overgrown meadow. We all screamed in unison as we were bounced around inside the carriage like a palmful of dice. The wheels hit a deep rut in the soil, and the entire thing rolled upside down. The horse dragged the carriage through the tall weeds for a few seconds, and then it managed to break free of its reins. It disappeared from sight with a rapid thundering of hooves, and then all went silent. In the aftermath, I found myself tangled up with the Victorian Sharon Stone on the roof of the carriage, which was now the floor. Falling Sky was lying heavily across both of us, growling and panting hot lion breath into my face. I groaned, "Get off me, you big galoot," and struggled my way through the window. I felt a hand slide up the back of my leg as I was wriggling to freedom and yelled, "Not right now, lady! The hell!" The succubus yelled back, "Fine, be like that. It's your loss, not mine." When we were all standing beside the carriage, I turned to the succubus and grunted, "How'd you choose your driver? Did he kind of just appear with the carriage?" She nodded thoughtfully and said, "I didn't really put much thought into it at the time, but yes, he just came with the coach. I dismissed him as part of the scenery, but I was wrong. Very unusual. I hold domain over all things in the void, so I can only presume the driver was him. You know, that piece of shit I'm not allowed to mention my name. I'd love to have a word with him, if you know what I mean." She held up her hand and flexed her fingers, which grew into wickedly long talons before my eyes. She wiggled them and breathed, "Scratchy, scratchy. There goes his innards. Unfortunately, I can't touch him. When he died, everyone thought he was a good man, so now he has the protection of fond thoughts and good intentions. It's a very powerful force." I stammered, Hey, wait up a second. Are you saying that, like, if everyone thinks you're a good person when you die, you're immune to the consequences of the spirit world?" "Exactly," she replied in a sour tone. "Not fair, is it?" "Nothing's fair in this universe, if you ask me. But that's just how it is. That's why it's so important that you attach his evil deeds to his name, so he can be held accountable for his crimes. It's not too late." I nodded in reluctant agreement and said, "Yeah, that sucks. But it is what it is. Hey, listen, I don't think I'm in the mood to do the thing right now. Can you please, maybe just..." She waved off my pathetic begging and shushed me with a finger to my lips. She said, "In your day and age, Catherine's death has long since been forgotten. The trail's gone cold. But this is a different where and a different when. If you want to play detective, you should investigate the scene of the crime. That's probably more than I should say, but frankly, the universe can mind its own damn business." I threw my hands up in the sky and exclaimed, Thank you so much. I never thought I'd say this to a literal demon, but you were the best." The succubus flared her eyes an unearthly neon red. She rumbled, "I consider this a debt, and the debt must be repaid in full. Do you understand this, my duckling?" I suppressed the urge to take a step or two away from her. I cleared my throat and quivered. Yeah, of course. Can you look like Sharon Stone when it happens? I mean, is that still, is that still okay?" She bared a mouthful of bristling fangs at me, and my blood froze. Falling Sky sprang back a good 10 feet and crouched low, his own snout wrinkled back to expose his teeth. The demon growled, "This is a debt, not a deal. I'll appear before you as I wish, you pathetic little bug." The succubus smiled to herself and added, "Perhaps I'll be in a foul mood that day, and I'll show you my true form. You won't be much of use to anyone after that, believe me. You'll be a broken shell that screams whenever it feels someone's touch." I stared at it with my mouth gaping open. Slowly I muttered, "Holy shit, lady. You sure don't take rejection well." "Oh, go fuck yourself," she snapped back briskly. "You're no Casanova, my boy. Just remember, it's a debt, not a deal. When I come to collect, you'll give me what's mine." She gave me the finger, and then vanished into thin air. There was a loud crack that sounded like thunder. She was gone. From behind me, Falling Sky suppressed a snicker. He shook his head at me and said, "Oh boy, you're in for some trouble now." I whirled around and shouted, "Oh, fuck you, man! This isn't funny!" No, not you," the skinwalker chuckled. "But the ancestors would think it's hilarious. I can't wait to tell them. No, let's start walking back to town, I guess. They'll have to find Catherine's old address somehow." I crossed my arms and said, "No, I have a better idea. Change into a horse." He gave me a puzzled look. Slowly he asked, "How is that going to get us there faster? You can't run as fast as..." "What? No! Oh, look, there's no way that's happening. Nope." I stormed closer to him and said in a strangled whisper, "Fuck you. I have a literal demon that wants to eat my face and devour my fucking soul, so fuck you. You're gonna turn into a fucking horsey, my man. Hear me? You're gonna turn into a nice little riding horse, and then I'm gonna jump on your back and ride your bitch ass into town. You're the one who decided we should catch a ride with her, remember? You, our fearless captain, who made me get into a carriage first. You remember that?" "Of course," he replied calmly. "Why should I go first? There was a demon in there. Much safer to see what happens to the other guy first." I gritted my teeth and rubbed my temples. Whether this world was real or unreal, it was up for debate. But either way, I was apparently still able to develop a nasty headache. I said, "Okay, that's valid. Sure. Now turn into a motherfucking horse, douchebag, or I'll tell Victor that you have a TV in your Hogan." Falling Sky gave me a wounded look. He mumbled, "Probably already knows. Victor knows everything." "He doesn't know jack frickin' shit about the day-to-day happenings around the zoo," I retorted. "Don't kid yourself. Vic kind of relies a bit on the microphones and cameras, but he mostly depends on his snitches. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got a few. The succubus, she's one of them, but he's only got her for the real heavy stuff. She demands a human life, and that could be risky. No, there's at least one more, and I think they're on the caretaker team. I don't know who it is yet, but I have my suspicions." The skinwalker blinked at me, stunned by this revelation. He mewed, "I didn't know that. Anyway, let's get moseying along, little doggy. Come on." Falling Sky muttered a curse under his breath, and he started to shimmer. A second later, he was a horse. He quietly hissed, "If you tell anyone about this, don't even worry about the demon, because I'll personally eat you alive." I gave him a weary nod and said, "It's a deal, Mr. Ed." I awkwardly scrambled onto his back. I'd never ridden a horse before, but Falling Sky was the best horse a first-timer could ever hope for. He trotted off down the dusty road, following the sky as it sank towards the horizon. I can only guess what kind of horrors the murder scene would have in store for us, but I knew one thing. I really, sincerely regretted taking this burden on in the first place, but it was too late to turn back. All I could do was harden my resolve, keep moseying on into the sunset. Hey, it's summertime, which means that if you guys want to beat the heat, and man, does it keep getting hotter and hotter, check out etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. You can always get yourself a little bit of iced tea from there. I think using a darker tea like the Dark and Stormy Night you can be able to get, which is the MrCreepyPasta themed one. It's kind of perfect doing like a dark sweet tea, and I don't know, maybe it's the Texas man in me, but a sweet tea is great in the hot summer. Once again, that's etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. As always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody out there on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. A very, very big thank you to everybody there, and to especially Jordan Humble, Diana Kraus, King Crab, Calcifer 420, Veronica Lynn Lopez, Marlon Chavez, Azazel 66603, Ethan Leon, Polaris Prospect X, Blake Rattler, Viceroy Scorn, Samara Lynn, Disciple, SullyMan, Brandon Mendoza, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Scruffy the Janitor, Brenna Crow, LaQueda, Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Dante Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, CursepoxPrimarch, M, Jettis Pet, Clonable, J Kieran, Mike, himbojerry, Crusader Chocobo, Remember the Sun, Escabine, Hour Minute Second Time, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Red Shadowcat, Turtleman, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Voice of Sand, Ficomel, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, Croconut 509, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Hades Nephew, Tommy Walters, Acid System, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Tristan Pelton, Ball Arms the Rat, The Ginger Bros, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kinchin. To all of you guys there, everybody who's down in the description, and everybody who can just give $1, I want to say thank you to you guys. You guys are the best. I love all of you, not just for supporting me, but for listening, for enjoying, and for always being there. And if you would like to join this list in the description, or this list of names that I terribly mispronounce, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And now, sweet dreams.